Friday nights were always my sanctuary, a time to unwind after a long work week, to let my mind drift and recharge. That evening was no different. The house was quiet, the soft hum of the refrigerator blending with the muted sound of a distant car engine. I was on the couch, my legs stretched out, the dim light of the TV flickering across the room. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, breaking the stillness. I glanced at it, expecting the usual, an email or a random notification. But instead, an unfamiliar number flashed on the screen, accompanied by a message. Curious, I leaned forward and picked up the phone. It wasn't a text. It was a video file. For a moment, I hesitated. Something about it felt off, but I couldn't pinpoint why. Intrigued and slightly cautious, I tapped the screen. As the file loaded, my heart remained calm, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to shatter the life I thought I knew. Zoe and I had been married for 8 years. From the moment I met her, I was captivated. She had this natural confidence, the kind that turned heads without even trying. Her curves were a masterpiece, soft and inviting, yet somehow commanding attention. I adored her. Every detail of her became a treasure. The way her body fit against mine, the way her touch ignited something primal in me. Our intimacy had always been passionate, an unspoken dance where words were unnecessary. She had a way of caressing me that made me feel like I was the only man in the world, like I was her world. But recently, something had changed. It wasn't obvious at first. These things never are. A missed kiss here, a distracted touch there. Small cracks in a foundation that had once felt unshakable. I tried to brush it off as stress, a product of busy schedules and the monotony of daily life. But the signs were there. The passion in her touch had faded, replaced by something mechanical, almost obligatory. She no longer met my eyes with the same hunger, the same fire that used to make me feel invincible. Our moments together grew less frequent, the intimacy that once defined us now a fading memory. About a month ago, Zoe mentioned something that caught me off guard. She told me her friends had invited her to a weekend at the sauna, a getaway she'd always dreamed of but never experienced. She seemed excited, her eyes lighting up as she explained how much she needed the break. I encouraged her. Of course, she deserved some time to relax. But a small, nagging feeling took root in my chest. I couldn't explain it, couldn't justify it, but it was there, a quiet voice whispering that something wasn't right. I tried to reassure myself that she would be with the girls I had known the whole time I was married to Zoe. When she left for that weekend, I told myself to let it go. I wanted to trust her, to believe that this was exactly what she said it was, a harmless trip with friends. Yet, the feeling lingered. I noticed more changes after she returned. Her laughter seemed forced, her movements more distant. Our intimacy, already strained, became almost non-existent. The moments that once felt electric now felt hollow, as though she was somewhere else entirely. Certain moments in life define everything that comes after them. They become milestones, markers in the timeline of your existence, shaping who you are and the choices you make. That Friday night became one of those moments for me. The video began with grainy, dim lighting and faint echoes of laughter. The scene was disorienting, the camera shaky and unfocused. It looked like a party, muffled voices, the clinking of glasses, and soft music in the background. My initial thought was confusion. Why had this been sent to me? Then the camera steadied and my stomach tightened. There she was, Zoe. Her laugh was unmistakable, the sound one I had loved for years. Her face was flushed, her smile wide, likely from alcohol. For a moment, I felt relief. Maybe this was just footage from the sauna trip she mentioned. But as the seconds ticked by, that hope began to fade. The laughter in the video took on a different tone, louder, more intimate, with undertones I couldn't ignore. The scene shifted abruptly, the grainy video flickering as the camera panned. Zoe wasn't alone. A man I didn't recognize stepped into the frame, his proximity to her unnervingly close. My chest tightened as confusion twisted into unease. My mind scrambled to make sense of what I was seeing, but before the pieces could fully come together, the video cut off. The screen went dark, leaving me frozen in place, gripping the phone as though it might hold the answers I desperately needed. I stared at the blank screen, my pulse pounding in my ears. The sudden end of the video left me in a state of suspended disbelief, my thoughts spiraling into chaos. Who had sent this? What was the purpose of showing me this fragment? And most painfully, what had happened in the moments I hadn't seen? But as I learned later, in those moments something happened that I could not even imagine. A wave of emotions surged through me. Confusion, dread, a flicker of anger, and beneath it all, a gnawing sense of despair. My mind replayed the brief seconds of the video, over and over, trying to find clarity in the murky images. The laughter, the dim lighting, the man standing far too close to my wife. It all felt surreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I set the phone down on the coffee table, my hands trembling. The air in the room felt heavy, almost oppressive, as though it carried the weight of the doubt and fear now consuming me. I leaned back into the couch, staring blankly at the ceiling as the fragments of the video replayed in my mind like a cruel loop. The seed of doubt had been planted, and it was already growing, its roots tangling around everything I thought I knew about my marriage. And most importantly, what was that man doing in the sauna? Zoe said that she was going with girls who were her old friends, whom I knew all. As I sat there, paralyzed by the weight of my thoughts, the phone buzzed again, the sharp sound slicing through the stillness of the room. I jolted upright, my heart leaping into my throat. Another message. My hands hovered over the phone, the hesitation palpable. A new video file had appeared, the sender still anonymous. I swallowed hard, my fingers trembling as they hovered over the screen. Whatever was in this new file, it was clear that the story wasn't over yet, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to see what came next. But deep down, I knew there was no turning back. The second video began much like the first. Dim lighting, muffled sounds, and the familiar warmth of laughter. But this time, the camera's perspective was clearer, more deliberate, as if it were meant to ensure that nothing went unnoticed. I felt the knot in my stomach tighten as the scene came into focus. The sauna's glow revealed more of the setting, a private, intimate space, the steam curling softly in the air. The participants were entirely unguarded, their vulnerability on full display. There at the center of it all was Zoe. My Zoe. Even in this situation, my eyes were drawn to her. Her silhouette against the warm light was mesmerizing, her movements graceful, effortless. She stood confidently, her figure illuminated in a way that seemed almost intentional. My chest tightened as I watched, a painful mix of pride and heartbreak. How could she look so beautiful, so unashamed, in a moment that felt so wrong? The tranquil sound of music drifted through the air, setting the tone for what followed. Zoe began to move with the rhythm, her body swaying gently, her steps deliberate. She raised her arms, letting the music guide her, each movement more intimate than the last. It wasn't just a dance. It was an expression, a language without words. The way she moved wasn't casual. It was purposeful, calculated, drawing attention in a way that left no room for misinterpretation. The man from the previous video was seated nearby, his posture relaxed but his focus entirely on Zoe. Her movements carried an undeniable allure, her gaze meeting his as she continued. The dance was hypnotic, the subtle interaction between them loaded with unspoken meaning. Each step seemed to erase a boundary, narrowing the space between them. My heart pounded as I watched, torn between disbelief and a twisted sense of admiration. I couldn't deny how captivating she looked, how effortlessly she commanded the room. Yet, the knowledge that this display wasn't meant for me cut deeper than anything I had ever felt. I could see the unspoken connection between them, the silent language of their bodies expressing a singular desire. As the music softened, Zoe leaned toward him, her smile widening in a way I once thought was reserved for me. My breath caught in my throat as she reached out, the intimacy of her gesture unmistakable. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. My eyes were glued to the screen, my mind screaming at me to stop, to end this torment. But I didn't. I couldn't. The video continued, revealing more than I could bear to see. The warmth of her smile, the way she moved, the confidence in her every gesture. It all felt like a betrayal of everything we had built together. My chest ached with a pain that was almost physical, my heart feeling as though it had been crushed under the weight of what I was witnessing. I didn't have the strength to watch, yet I couldn't tear my eyes away. Each second felt like an eternity, every detail etching itself into my memory. When the video finally ended, the screen went dark again, leaving me staring at my reflection. My face was pale, my expression a mix of anger, despair, and disbelief. I set the phone down, my hands trembling uncontrollably. The bitter aftertaste of what I had just seen lingered, a sickening weight in my chest. My mind raced, replaying every second of the video, each frame more unbearable than the last. How could she do this? How had I missed the signs? The questions were endless, each one a dagger to my already shattered heart. The betrayal felt absolute, consuming me entirely. I glanced at the clock. She would be home soon. My stomach churned at the thought of facing her, of pretending for even a moment that I didn't know. But I couldn't confront her yet. Not until I could think clearly, not until I could put words to the overwhelming storm of emotions tearing me apart. I sat there, staring at the front door, waiting for the sound of her car in the driveway. My mind was a chaotic swirl of anger, sadness, and confusion. Memories of our life together played like a cruel slideshow, each one tainted by the knowledge of what I had just seen. The laughter we had shared, the moments of intimacy that once felt sacred, they all felt hollow now, reduced to illusions shattered by the truth. I sat and waited for her to return and thought about how to start a conversation. The seconds stretched into minutes, each one dragging painfully as I waited. My mind cycled through possibilities, wondering if she would sense the shift in me, if she would know that I had seen the truth. I didn't know what I would say when she walked through that door. Didn't know if I would be able to hold myself together. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same. I was so immersed in my swirling thoughts that I didn't notice the sound of the car pulling into the driveway or the front door opening. When I finally looked up, Zoe was standing in front of me, her cheerful demeanor radiating an unsettling normalcy, as though nothing had happened. She exhaled contentedly, setting her overnight bag by the door, and made a casual remark about me still being awake, suggesting I should have gone to bed. Her tone was light, almost playful, but I couldn't respond. I just stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman I loved with the one I had seen in the video. My chest tightened as I watched her move, so oblivious to the storm that had been raging inside me since the moment the video began. When I asked about her weekend, my voice colder than I intended, she answered with ease. She described it as wonderful, full of wine, laughter, and conversations about trivialities, a relaxing escape she claimed to have needed. She moved to the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of water, her actions so casual, so unbothered, as if she hadn't just upended my world. I nodded slowly, my eyes tracking her every movement, a tumult of emotions swirling inside me. Anger, sadness, and an inexplicable love that still clung to me. The storm in my chest threatened to spill over, but I kept my composure. I suggested we watch something together, gesturing toward the TV. Her curiosity piqued. She settled onto the couch with her glass in hand, smiling as she asked what I had in mind. Without replying, I picked up my phone and cast the video onto the television. The room filled with dim lighting and muffled laughter as the sound of scene began to play. Zoe froze. Her relaxed posture stiffened instantly, and her smile faded as her eyes locked on the screen. The glass she held hovered mid-air, forgotten, as the reality of what she was seeing dawned on her. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out everything but the sound of my own breath and the video. I struggled to contain the wave of conflicting emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. Watching her reaction was almost as painful as the video itself. My heart ached, torn between the deep love I still harbored for her and the overwhelming disgust and pain of what I had seen. She didn't look at me. Her eyes remained glued to the screen, her lips slightly parted. When the man appeared and the scene shifted to the dance, I heard her exhale sharply, the weight of the moment crashing down on both of us. When the video ended, the room plunged into a suffocating silence. The oppressive weight of unspoken words filled the space between us. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even think clearly. All I could do was sit there, my body heavy with the burden of what had just been confirmed. Eventually, Zoe broke the silence. Her voice was quiet, trembling, filled with resignation rather than denial. She admitted that I wasn't supposed to see the video, acknowledging the reality of what I had watched without offering excuses. Her bluntness stunned me, and I felt my breath hitch as I tried to process her lack of protest. She wasn't even going to deny it. She admitted that her feelings for me had faded over time. The love that once bound us together seemed to have slipped away, leaving her feeling distant and disconnected. She explained that she hadn't planned for any of this to happen, but the truth was undeniable. Our marriage had run its course. She confessed that the man in the video was an escort, someone she had never met before, and that it wasn't about him specifically. For her, it was about escaping, about feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Her words hit me like a series of blows, each one more devastating than the last. 8 years of marriage, the life we had built together, all reduced to a fleeting moment of betrayal. My mind reeled as I struggled to make sense of her explanation. The woman I had trusted completely was now sitting across from me, admitting that she had turned to a stranger for something I could no longer provide. When I asked why she hadn't come to me, why she hadn't told me how she felt, her answer only deepened my pain. She explained that she hadn't known how to bring it up, hadn't wanted to hurt me, and had convinced herself that she could handle it alone. But, she admitted, things had spiraled beyond her control. Her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain she had inflicted on me. But I couldn't. I was frozen, paralyzed by the weight of my emotions. I sat there, staring at her, the love and anger inside me colliding in a way that left me feeling hollow and lost. Then, Zoe took a deep breath, wiping the tears from her face. She straightened her posture, her expression shifting to one of quiet resolve. She announced that she had made a decision. Her voice was steady now, though her hands still trembled slightly. Her words stopped me in my tracks. I looked at her, my heart pounding, my mind racing with possibilities. But she didn't elaborate. She just sat there, her expression firm, as though she had already come to terms with whatever choice she had made. And I was left to wonder what that decision would mean for both of us. However, she didn't keep me waiting long. Zoe sat across from me, her expression calm, almost detached, as she delivered her decision with a finality that left no room for negotiation. She was leaving me. The words were sharp and measured, striking with the precision of a blade. In that moment, everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and my future unraveled. I had anticipated many outcomes: anger, tears, pleas for forgiveness, but not this. Not the cold, deliberate announcement that she had already decided to walk away. As she continued, her tone shifted subtly, almost as if she were recounting a liberating experience. She spoke of the pleasure she had found with another man, her words laced with an ease that made my stomach churn. It wasn't just the confession itself that hurt. It was the way she described it, as though she had finally discovered something she had been longing for. Her hesitation to act on these desires, she admitted, had lasted a long time. She had wrestled with the idea of stepping outside the bounds of our marriage, torn between loyalty to the life we had built and the growing temptation to explore something new. She explained that the idea to call an escort had come to her suddenly, while sitting in the sauna with her friends. The casualness of her revelation made the knife twist deeper. She admitted that she knew she was being filmed on her phone, but she did not consider the possibility that this footage ever reached me. She confessed that knowing I had seen it simplified everything for her, sparing her the discomfort of lengthy explanations. My discovery had, in her words, freed her from the weight of secrecy, allowing her to finally be honest about what she no longer felt. Her words echoed in my mind, each one a sledgehammer blow to the foundation of my reality. I tried to grasp how she could sit there, so calm, so unapologetic, and speak about the end of our marriage as though it were inevitable. The anger within me surged, a wildfire consuming every rational thought. My fists clenched as the heat of my emotions coursed through me, demanding release. I wanted to yell, to scream at her for throwing away everything we had built together. My voice rose in my throat, but I swallowed it down, unwilling to give her the satisfaction of seeing how deeply she had hurt me. My chest tightened, my breathing quickened, and my vision blurred with the sheer intensity of my frustration. How could she dismiss our 8 years of marriage so easily, reducing it to something expendable, something that could be discarded for the thrill of a fleeting moment? But anger, I realized, couldn't sustain me. As quickly as it flared, it began to burn out, leaving behind something colder and far more devastating. As the flames of anger subsided, they revealed a void, a deep, hollow ache that settled in my chest. Sadness poured in, overwhelming me with its weight. I stared at Zoe, the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted implicitly, and realized she was no longer mine. Perhaps she hadn't been mine for a long time. Memories of our life together played in my mind like a cruel montage. The laughter we had shared, the dreams we had built, the quiet moments of comfort that had once defined us, all of it now felt distant, as though it belonged to another lifetime. The realization that those memories were now tainted, reduced to shadows of what could have been, suffocated me. I thought about the trust one had placed in her, the love I had given so freely, and how effortlessly she had set it all aside. My chest ached, the kind of pain that isn't physical but feels as though it could crush you nonetheless. I tried to cling to the remnants of my anger, hoping it might shield me from the overwhelming sadness. But it slipped through my fingers, leaving me exposed and vulnerable to the tidal wave of emotions that followed. I sat there, staring at the empty space where our future once existed, feeling the full weight of what I had lost. The hours after she left passed in a haze. The house felt eerily silent, the once familiar rooms now cold and uninviting. I sat alone, replaying her words over and over in my mind, each repetition cutting deeper than the last. It was as though her voice lingered in the air, a haunting echo of the life we had shared. At some point, I realized that there was no going back. Zoe had made her choice, and it was final. I couldn't change her decision, nor could I erase the pain she had caused. The only thing left for me to decide was how I would move forward. Would I let this break me, or would I find a way to rebuild? Her words about my discovery, making things easier for her, stung with bitterness, but they also brought a strange clarity. I realized I couldn't stay trapped in the past, clinging to something that no longer existed. It wasn't about forgiving her or forgetting what she had done. It was about choosing to reclaim my life, to find a way to move beyond the devastation. The sadness didn't dissipate. It lingered, a heavy presence that I knew I would carry for a long time. But as the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I felt a faint flicker of determination. It wasn't hope, Not yet, but it was the beginning of something. A resolve to survive, to endure, and perhaps one day to heal. The void Zoe left behind was immense, an emptiness that seemed insurmountable in the beginning. But as I sat there, staring at the chair where she had been, I realized that this void was also an opportunity. I could let it consume me, or I could fill it with something new, strength, purpose, and the belief that I could build a life worth living again. The path ahead would be difficult, filled with moments of doubt and pain. But I was determined to take it one step at a time. I wasn't ready to forgive, and I wasn't ready to let go of the sadness entirely. But I was ready to begin the process of moving forward. And in that moment, that was enough. I spent days in solitude, grappling with the enormity of what had happened. At first, I didn't know how to move forward. My anger and sadness competed for dominance, leaving little room for rational thought. But as time passed, the chaos in my mind began to settle. I started to reflect, not just on what Zoe had done, but on the cracks in our marriage that I had ignored for far too long. The truth was painful but undeniable. Zoe and I had been drifting apart for years. Her betrayal was the culmination of a distance that had been growing between us, a distance I had chosen to ignore in the hopes that it would resolve itself. I had let my complacency take over, assuming that our love would be enough to carry us through. But love alone wasn't enough, not without communication, trust, and effort from both sides. I realized that moving forward meant taking responsibility for my own role in the breakdown of our relationship. It didn't absolve Zoe of her choices, but it helped me understand that this wasn't just about her betrayal. It was about a marriage that had been quietly unraveling long before the video arrived on my phone. As I began to rebuild my life, I found myself reflecting on the lessons I had learned from the experience. The first and most important was the value of honesty, not just with a partner, but with oneself. If Zoe and I had been honest about our feelings earlier, perhaps things would have turned out differently. Perhaps we could have addressed the distance between us before it became insurmountable. Or perhaps we would have realized sooner that our paths were diverging, allowing us to part ways amicably instead of with the pain and betrayal that now defined our ending. I also learned the importance of vigilance in relationships, not in a paranoid or controlling way, but in being attuned to the subtle shifts that signal deeper issues. The missed kisses, the distracted touches, the lack of passion. These were signs that I had dismissed as temporary. In hindsight, they were warnings I should have paid attention to. Finally, I learned the value of resilience. Zoe's betrayal broke me in ways I hadn't thought possible, but it also forced me to confront my own strength. I realized that I could survive this, that I could rebuild my life even after losing something I thought was irreplaceable. To anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation, my advice is simple but hard-earned. Allow yourself to feel everything. The anger, the sadness, the confusion, it's all part of the healing process. Don't rush to suppress your emotions or force yourself to move on before you're ready. Healing takes time, and it's okay to not have all the answers right away. At the same time, don't let the pain consume you. Use it as a catalyst for growth, a reason to reflect on what went wrong and how you can build a better future for yourself. And above all, be kind to yourself. Infidelity isn't just a betrayal of trust, it's a blow to your self-worth. Remind yourself that someone else's choices don't define your value. Months later, I'm still piecing my life back together. Some days are harder than others, but I've found small pockets of peace in the routines I've created for myself. I've reconnected with old friends, picked up hobbies I'd forgotten, and started focusing on the things that bring me joy. The scars from Zoe's betrayal remain, but they no longer define me. They are reminders of what I've endured and proof of my resilience. Zoe and I haven't spoken since she left, and I don't know if we ever will. I've let go of the need for closure, realizing that sometimes the only closure you get is the one you create for yourself. I'm learning to embrace the uncertainty of the future, trusting that with time, I'll find happiness again. If you were in my position, would you have handled things differently? How would you rebuild your life after such a betrayal? I'd love to hear your thoughts.